Frankly, it's about having enough staff to be able to handle the situation.
Particularly taking aim at the people using freedom as a defense of their actions.
Very dark winter.
I said in March it was going to be a long, dark winter. We're still in that long, dark winter.
Britain is braced for a dark winter.
In plain terms, prepare for a brutal winter.
We are choosing between a long winter.
Fear that we are entering a very, very dark winter.
Evening, everyone. As the country appears headed into a dark winter, overwhelmed by
You said President-elect Biden is charging ahead, promising a bold new strategy to fight the virus, but warning of a dark winter. Mary Bruce.
We're still facing a very dark winter.
Just weeks ahead of what one doctor says most epidemiologists are predicting will be
what we have been calling a dark winter, with big spikes.
Without better planning, 2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history.
We may very well be entering the darkest winter of our lifetimes in terms of death, in terms of human suffering.
These next weeks and months are going to be absolutely crucial to trying to contain this virus. The numbers are all going in the wrong direction, and we are facing a very dark winter. The news about the vaccine is very, very encouraging.
Meanwhile, Minnesota's governor says he's going to do what he can to make sure what is happening in Wisconsin does not happen here.
Governor Tim Walz was part of a roundtable talk today on COVID-19. Susan Elizabeth Littlefield shows us how the state's fight is going against the virus.
That's what the governor wanted to talk about, working together. 6 months into the pandemic, he gathered the health commissioner, a psychologist who lost her beloved mother to the virus, and an ER doctor whose entire family got the virus.
Yes, it was extremely.
I said in March it was going to be a long, dark winter. We're still in that long, dark winter.
Susan Elizabeth Littlefield, WCCO 4 News.
Also today, Governor Walz announced that he's going to extend Minnesota's peacetime emergency another 30 days. Each time the governor declares or extends an emergency, lawmakers have the chance to vote on it. Walz says that there will be a special session Monday for that and also to discuss COVID funding.
Britain is braced for a dark winter as new measures are deployed to stem a surge of coronavirus. It's feared new cases will near 50,000 a day next month, with many deaths to follow. But fearing economic meltdown too, it's lockdown light for now. The onus put on people to follow the rules.
Unless we take action, the risk is that we will have to go for tougher measures later when the deaths have already mounted and we have a huge caseload of infection such as we had in the spring.
In plain terms, prepare for a brutal winter.
There are unquestionably difficult months to come.
And just
rules with tougher penalties and fines of up to £10,000.
It's targeting hospitality to try to stem the virus's exponential growth. The biggest hit, all bars and restaurants must close by 10.
Never in our history has our collective destiny and our collective health depended so completely on our individual behaviour.
Calling on the public to once again make sacrifices for at least 6 months. That's through Christmas and into the new year.
If there was ever a time, I think, when people needed to take responsibility for their sisters and for their brothers, it is that time. I just fear that we are entering a very, very dark winter. We have 4 vaccines in large-scale trials. Once approved, it'll take many months before vaccines have been distributed to the various tiers that will get it first, second, third, and fourth. And so it's going to take some time after that for those vaccines to have an impact on this virus. Experts say another year after that before everything sort of approaches normal again. Sadly, according to a poll taken in May.
Everyone, as the country appears headed into a dark winter, overwhelmed by a growing new wave of COVID infections, another hopeful ray of light appeared on the horizon today. A second COVID vaccine candidate, its makers say, appears to be more successful than imagined. Moderna announcing today its vaccine is nearly 95% effective. And with last week's upbeat announcement from Pfizer about its shot, there is building optimism about a way out of this pandemic, but one that experts warn sadly won't come before we face what may be the worst days of this crisis. Miguel Almaguer begins our reporting.
Announcing today its potential COVID vaccine is 94.5% effective, drug maker Moderna says if granted emergency authorization by the FDA, it could roll out doses as early as December. Its clinical trial with 30,000 participants finding no significant safety concerns.
What does this mean for Americans at home?
It means some hope that we are going to beat this thing, and we're going to beat it sooner rather than later.
Moderna now joins Pfizer, who just last week reported their vaccine is 90% effective.
We have enough vaccine doses between these two vaccines to immunize about 20 million people during the month of December.
States will decide how to roll out vaccines, but the National Academy of Medicine makes this recommendation. Covering just 5% of the population, Phase 1A includes high-risk Americans like healthcare workers and first responders, and there's currently not enough doses for them. Phase 1B covers those with underlying medical conditions and seniors living in congregate settings like nursing homes. Phase 2 covers 30 to 35% of the population and includes critical workers like those in the food supply system, teachers, and those over 65. Phase 3, 40 to 45% of the population, includes most young adults and children. Phase 4 protects everyone else.
Our goal would be by the second quarter to have enough vaccine for every American that would like to get vaccinated.
With the hope of vaccinating most Americans by the end of spring, details and dates remain unclear. Moderna's vaccine, for example.
You said President-elect Biden is charging ahead, promising a bold new strategy to fight the virus, but warning of a dark winter.
The challenge before us right now is still immense and growing. There's a need for bold action to fight this pandemic. We're still facing a very dark winter.
After the president spent months downplaying masks, Biden is now trying to reset the conversation.
I want to be very clear. The goal of mask wearing is not to make your life less comfortable. It's to give something back to all of us, a normal life.
Urging Americans to come together and do their part.
We could save tens of thousands of lives if everyone would just wear a mask.
Now to our coverage of COVID-19. El Paso cases are soaring and the city is now under a mandatory curfew, while cases across the southeast Texas area are
just weeks ahead of what one doctor says most epidemiologists are predicting will be
what we are been calling a dark winter with big spikes. Could be as bad as the summer or worse.
Dr. Luis Ostrowski is an infectious disease specialist at UT Health in the Texas Medical Center. He says COVID-19 cases are climbing slightly higher each week. He's worried about family and friends gathering indoors later this month.
We have this kind of cadence of cases that we can manage right now. But again, if we had a big event like Thanksgiving, where a lot of people are going to get infected, we're going to have to go back to crisis mode, which is what we were going through in the summer.
The rate of people getting positive results from their COVID tests has inched up too. It rose from 5% 3 weeks ago in Houston to 6.7% this week.
These things do.
Today, the world is confronting a public health emergency unlike any we've seen in over a century. We are facing a highly transmissible and deadly virus which not only claims lives but also disrupts the very foundations of our society. Our window of opportunity is closing. If we fail to improve our response now, based on science, I fear the pandemic will get worse and be prolonged. There will be likely a resurgence of COVID-19 this fall. It'll be greatly compounded by the challenges of seasonal influenza. Without better planning, 2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history. First and foremost, we need to be truthful with the American people. Americans deserve the truth. The truth must be based on science. We have the world's greatest scientists. Let us lead. Let us speak without fear of retribution. The virus is here. It's everywhere. We need to be able to find it, isolate it, and stop it. We need to have the right testing for everyone who needs it. We need to be able to trace contacts, isolate, quarantine, and appropriately while striving to develop a cure. Initially, our nation was not as prepared as we should have been, as we could have been. Some scientists
The virus pandemic continues to rage across the entire nation. We spoke with one area health official who says the next 4 weeks are crucial, and if we fail, there will be deadly consequences. Here's KQ2's Madeline McLean with more.
We may very well be entering the darkest winter of our lifetimes in terms of death, in terms of human suffering.
3,340 deaths, 2,225,000 cases, 4,600 in the last 24 hours, and 2,250 people hospitalized.
Unfortunately, we as public health feel like the public's reaction has been disturbingly cavalier.
The Clinton County Health Department head says his team can no longer keep up.
This week hit the point where we're not able to investigate new cases in a timely manner. So our goal is always to have new cases called within 24 hours of receiving the report. We're not able to do that. We're running 3 or 4 days behind at this point.
A 3 to 4 day delay has serious consequences when people don't understand everything they should be doing to keep from exacerbating the problem. And it's not just in Clinton County.
Every county in Missouri is currently overwhelmed with new cases. We have basically uncontrolled community spread ongoing throughout the state of Missouri.
The weight of the pandemic crushing Missouri hospitals, doctors, nurses.
We all feel like we're drowning in new cases and are unable to reach the surface and draw a fresh breath.
The governor making his most urgent plea yet for personal responsibility.
We can't keep expecting the hospitals to meet the demand. It's not about ventilators. It's not about ICU beds. Frankly, it's about having enough staff to be able to handle the situation.
Particularly taking aim at the people using freedom as a defense.
The latest numbers from the CDC reveal hospitals have been counting patients who died from serious pre-existing conditions as COVID-19 deaths. One America's Pearson Sharp has more as the CDC counts over 51,000 patients who died from heart attacks as opposed to coronavirus.
The Centers for Disease Control have updated their death counts for coronavirus and reveal yet again that COVID-19 is rarely the actual cause of death among coronavirus patients. According to the CDC themselves, of the 220,000 deaths attributed to the coronavirus, 87,000 of them died from pneumonia and influenza. Another 17,000 died from chronic respiratory diseases, and 26,000 died from respiratory distress syndrome. 44,000 patients died from hypertensive diseases, 23,000 died from heart disease, and a whopping 28,000 died from cardiac arrest and heart failure. Yet all of these, even patients who died from heart attacks, were marked down as dying from the coronavirus. Doctors who spoke with One American News explained that 131,000 patients who are being considered COVID-19 deaths already had life-ending diseases, including cancer, dementia, and even end-stage renal failure. And according to the CDC again, if you look at place of death, you'll see that some 10,000 patients who died from COVID were on hospice care, meaning they were terminally ill to begin with and were already expected to die. Doctors tell One American News that all of these patients were critically ill and likely died from their pre-existing conditions without any help from the coronavirus. However, they explain that the CARES Act, passed by Congress in March, gives hospitals a 20% bonus on their diagnosis-related group paid for by Medicare. Essentially, that means doctors are being paid to list deaths as coronavirus without any indication the patient's death was actually COVID-related. The 1918 Spanish flu is often used as an example of a comparable pandemic, and perhaps it's more comparable than most people realize, according to the National Institutes of Health and even Dr. Anthony Fauci himself, in a 2008 paper explained that the majority of deaths during the 1918 and 1919 pandemic were not caused by the influenza alone. Instead, Dr. Fauci says that the vast majority of deaths were caused by bacterial pneumonia. Exactly what the CDC shows we're witnessing again today. The CDC backs these numbers up, explaining that coronavirus itself is responsible for just 6% of all deaths listed as coronavirus related. The other 94% of deaths are due to pre-existing comorbidities, including serious illnesses and advanced age. However, despite this report being officially published by the CDC, so far the mainstream media have completely ignored it, instead continuing to hype a pandemic that seems less dangerous